Hello, extra time.
You point to the league not to get a hug because it damages your reputation. It makes people, when they read it, just laugh at you.
The single block, they're playing in the League One and they're playing in the Europa League and they're credit to the game in this country. Maybe we should get Stephen Kenny down to manage the Irish team.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Extratime.com podcast. We're host Luke Jordan, welcome Macdara, Ferris, alongside again. Macdara, how are you?
I'm good, Luke.
Did you enjoy your week off?
The international break is good because I enjoyed it. I was at the Latvia game, I was at the France game, I was at some of the pre-match press conferences, which was interesting as well. But it gives the league a bit of a breather as well because, in previous years you had league games on top of really big Ireland games and, it just didn't give the space for both. Basically, Ireland subsumes everything as well. So I think that's good. And then also there's a number of players within the league now who are playing international, because I think Max Mata was playing for New Zealand, and I know Pico Lopez got a couple of clean sheets for Cape Verde in their AFCON qualification. So, and then there was a number of players playing with the under-21 teams as well. So I think having these breaks in the middle of the season is good from that point of view. And yeah, I did definitely enjoy seeing France come to town as well last week.
Well, I had a great week. I made my debut in the press box. It was a great occasion.
Oh, you did as well? Yeah.
Yeah, big occasion. I'm delighted to have an experienced reporter with us today. Paul here, how are you?
Pretty good, lads. How are you getting on?
Paul, any advice for a fledgling reporter here making his debut?
Don't be afraid to ask questions of other journalists.
Okay, right. Good stuff. I'm not afraid to.
They're not as mean-spirited and grumpy as they look. Most of them, anyway.
Well, here's my first question. After watching the two matches, where do you think we're going? Where are we progressing, as some people say? Or are we, as Damien Delaney and Brian Kerr, are we unhappy? Are we giving out? Where do you stand?
Well, I do. I find the Kerr and Damien Delaney stuff very interesting in the sense that I don't think there's anything wrong with having, different voices saying different things. I've been a kind of a supporter of Kenny all along, and there's a fair. I'd say there's probably more people in the Irish press pack. Not that it matters a jot, to be honest with you, but I'd say there's probably more people who would be supportive of Kenny than would be less so, if you want to call it that. But I think there's good ground, and I can see the reasons for both sides. I don't think anybody who supports Kenny and has supported Kenny along the way, I don't think anybody is of the opinion that this year, I think everybody is of the opinion that this is the year that matters, you can be supportive of a manager without complete blind loyalty. I don't think I've seen that phrase kind of thrown around about, how Kenny has a really loyal band of supporters and it's almost blind faith at some stage. I've seen that peddled out by one or two journalists. I don't get that at all. I don't see that. I think anybody who has been supportive of Kenny along the way is also asked questions and it's also critical of things when they need to be. Certainly I feel myself that that's how I feel. I've covered it. That, he doesn't get a free pass on certain things, particularly some of the stuff he comes out with and he says, Kenny kind of does make these big, bold statements and hasn't always kind of backed them up. Macdara was at the press conference there before the France game, I think, where Kenny was talking about bringing fire and ice to the party, which was a brilliant soundbite. And for us, that's gold. Did they bring fire and ice? They probably brought the ice in terms of they were fairly cool and calm and collected. And they defended brilliantly and heroically, and it was kind of nearly reeling in the ears stuff with some Irish teams at times. Did they bring the fire? They certainly did for 10 minutes towards the end. They probably couldn't really play like that any earlier in the game because they would have just got carved open. But I think we all saw a very typical Irish closing 10, 12 minutes of throwing the kitchen sink, and you could apply that to any Irish manager down the years. Like that's there's been so many of them under Kerr, under Trapattoni, under Martin O'Neill, under Mick McCarthy. That was just a sort of almost a uniform kind of type finish to a match into the South Stand in the Aviva. So, to a roundabout point of getting back to your question, where are we going? I would like to think that we're going forwards, but part of me says we've been here before with Kenny, where we kind of thought that we were going in the right direction, and then they haven't been able to always back up half decent performances and half decent results when it matters. And before this campaign started, once we knew the fixtures, the game in Greece this summer is a bigger game, and always was a bigger game than anything that happened against France at the Aviva.
But just on Delaney and Kerr, I think that was one of the complaints Delaney had, wasn't it? That in the press conference, like you referred to, like he said about the ice and fire. And I think Delaney after the game was kind of just saying, like, no, there was no difference that he hadn't seen to any other Irish performance in terms of big teams coming to town. But then you other people saying that, well, actually, they thought they tried to play through instead of automatically knocking it long or going direct, say, to a tall, big, quick centre forward. They did try to play through a little bit, and sometimes France pressed them. So be it, that's going to happen. But there would maybe a slight variation. Would that be fair to say from maybe the previous times you've played top nations in Dublin? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. No, look, Kenny's Ireland, they're going to play football, and they are playing football. But we shouldn't forget that when Kenny was Dundalk manager, and Dundalk were doing really well in European group stages and things like that, absolutely no issue with that Dundalk team going direct when they had to. They could play, there was this kind of assumption that Dundalk played champagne football under Stephen Kenny. Absolutely wasn't always that way. They did play some really, really good football. They won league titles, and deservedly so. But when they had to, and particularly in those battles with Cork City, when they were going for titles with Cork City, and Cork under John Caulfield maybe weren't quite sort of the flowing football that maybe a Stephen Kenny team might be associated with. Dundalk under Kenny were able to match and play a horses for courses type game. And that was going to always have to apply against France. They did try and play some decent football at times, but I think there was always that risk and reward element that if you tried to overdo it against a team like France, that they're going to kill you on the counter. And Kenny had spoken to press conferences all week saying that the secret to playing France was being able to counter the counter attack, if you get me. So I think they did that really well. And when they tried to play football, they played some decent football. When they had to go long, they went long. And I don't think anybody should make apologies for that. I think sometimes Kenny might sort of make a rod for his own back in a way with some of these kind of very bold predictions, about this, that, and the other. And sometimes when they don't come to pass, when some of those predictions don't come to pass, at times there's a little bit of a degree where he's nearly doubling down and sort of almost claiming that things happened when they didn't. Just little small things. And, I think maybe that's where some of his critics are a little bit more sort of hammering home the message that, you don't always have to dress this up to be some sort of revolution all of the time, when clearly some things haven't worked. So, people can see things with their own eyes. So, you don't need to tell them what they're seeing. They can see what they're seeing. But for the most part, look, I still think there's reasons to be hopeful as opposed to optimistic in this campaign. Like if we can play like we did against France when we go to Greece, happy days. I think you'd have to be confident, but only if they can reproduce that. And that's the big question, because they just don't tend to follow up with some of these results. Like you saw after in the World Cup campaign, reasonable performance in defeat away to Serbia, and then we come home and we lose 1-0 to Luxembourg, which was 2 years to the day on the day of the France match. So it's just a little bit Jekyll and Hyde stuff still,
I suppose that's a good yardstick to go off, Macdara, in terms of 2 years ago today of the French game, we had Luxembourg, and the amount of commentary over that game, people were calling for Kenny's head, and we don't have to go over that. That's 2 years ago. But in terms of, if you were to take that game and fast forward 2 years later, do you think there has been progress in terms of, like, say, for example, would you be more confident with this side going forward that when we go to Greece and when we have Greece at home, play Gibraltar, because that is kind of the games that the 12 points have to be earned. Like, let's be honest, like, they're the games we're going to be judging Stephen Kenny on this term. Can we beat the pot three teams? Would you feel more confident going into those games 2 years down the line of Kenny's reign that we are making progress and we can go into these games expecting maybe 3 points?
Yeah, I do think there has been progress. Like that game 2 years ago against Luxembourg, I was in the press box for that one, and it was a it was in a soulless, empty stadium, and we didn't play well that day at all, and let in one of those screamers. There's been much discussion about the statistics and the number of long range shots that we're conceding. What gives me, then the atmosphere on Monday night, was very like couldn't be more different. Absolutely chalk and cheese. But I think Ireland certainly benefit from playing these home games in front of really big crowds as well. What makes me optimistic also is the age profile of the players, and the players that have been brought through. Like Kenny, through various reasons, has been able to blood of his own making and stuff not of his own making, has been able to blood a huge number of players. But if you look at that age profile of that Ireland team, they've been excellent, and there's the potential there for them to grow, to get better together. There wasn't, you look back, it's different age profile than the team that would have the likes of Shane Duffy from 2 years ago as well. You've players who are playing in the Premier League. We don't need to get into Evan Ferguson, but the likes of Nathan Collins, who came as close as you'll get to getting the equaliser. That was probably as good a save as I've seen late in the game as well. So, but it'll be a very different type of game, as Paul said. It'll be a very different type of game against Greece. Like Ireland played, it was five at the back. Kenny's used various kind of formations, but it was definitely five at the back. You could see it across the line, and that was all to do with trying to make sure not to give the space for Mbappe to get in behind. And just the speed that he has with the football at his feet is just incredible. And so to have, essentially Ireland kind of doubling up back there, but it'll be very different coming up against Greece. We'll have a lot more of the ball. I think France had over 60% possession. Now we're going to Greece in the concern is that game is played in June. A lot of those young and upcoming players that I mentioned are playing in the championship. Their season will be over a month. It's one of the reasons why Ireland are doing a training camp in Turkey beforehand. Don't know exactly where it is, Paul, but I presume it's probably similar where the women's team have had their training camps. So the FAI know all the logistics and all that type of thing. I think they're going to play maybe a behind closed doors game as well, which is something the women's team has done. Yeah,
they're going to Antalya in Turkey, which is I was there before when I think Martin O'Neill took an Ireland squad out there for a training camp, and we played a friendly against Turkey, which Declan Rice played in, because I remember being in the mix zone afterwards, interviewing Declan Rice with a few others, and his dad arrived out, and halfway through the interview, the dad walked past, spotted Declan. Two of them had a massive big embrace, and there was very teary-eyed people talking about what a proud moment it was. So yeah, that's what I remember Antalya for. And also, everything was shut while we were over there. There wasn't much open, but yeah.
So the idea being that they can get that fitness up. They can also it gives them time to work on things. But like with all the qualifiers played in the calendar year, like there's no wriggle room. I think what we've got from that France game is probably as much as we could get out of it. I don't think there was much expectation that we were going to get a win, let alone a point. But I think there's a lot of positives can be taken from it. But international football is very different from club football. There is no momentum because the next window is so far away. And players come in and out of form, players get injured, and then it'll be at the end of kind of a strange season with the break for the World Cup in the middle. But results went our way the previous week with the French stuff in the Netherlands. Like if we're actually qualify automatically, finishing the top two, we probably want France to beat the Netherlands as they did and do it home and away. So it gives us a potentially an opportunity there. Realistically, I probably think it's about going into that last game, that last qualification game, which is for Ireland is away in Amsterdam, with having something to play for. And if the result doesn't go Ireland's way, to take that into the playoff system, which is so super complicated. I haven't even looked at it yet, but I will at some stage. But safe to say, that's probably what the target is to have a good qualification campaign. Like brilliant. I'm not going to if we actually get second place, brilliant. I'm not giving out about that, but it's a case of probably doing as well as we can, getting some positive results and trying to bring whatever momentum we can into the playoffs, which are in next year.
What did Brian Kerr famously say that before the 2020 Euros, I think it was, that it's harder not to qualify for the Euros because half of Europe gets there, isn't that right?
Yeah, it is harder, but
and we didn't get there.
but the draw that we've got, I was looking at the draw that Northern Ireland have with what is this, Finland and Denmark in the group, and we ended up getting France and Netherlands. And, I don't normally get too fixated with the draw. It's like, well, the draw, it is what it is, but it's just so difficult, two teams who, France are, the best European team. We know how good they are, but it was a Dutch side that, went quite far in the World Cup. We'll remember the penalty shootout, one of the best games of the World Cup. They got beaten by Argentina on penalties to go on to win the World Cup. Change of manager since then. There was food poisoning in the camp. I was joking, saying that the Dutch should have been eating cheese sandwiches or pizza. Might have been better, but seemingly it was a dodgy chicken curry, which didn't help them. But they didn't play particularly well on the Friday night as well. So the game in Dublin against them, there'll be so much talk of the 2002 World Cup qualifier when they come to town. So, but yeah, I think the Latvia game, you're going back a little bit. We won and were expected to win. Thought we played very well. We just gave up 2 kind of stupid goals, and that probably helped us just kind of blood some players in. So, I think there's, as I said before, there's plenty of positives to take out of this international week.
And as well as for so many parallels to maybe Mick McCarthy, his third campaign, Stephen Kenny's third campaign, Holland. Maybe it could be written in the start of Stephen Kenny to go to Amsterdam, and maybe wishful thinking, who knows? But anyway, just on something you said, Macdara, I'm going to completely ignore you because you said it's not getting into Evan Ferguson. Let's get into Evan Ferguson because it's been a bit of a talking point this week. I got to pause one first. In terms of the flags we made from, he got his first international goal. The hype is surreal about him. I have my own personal opinion on it, but I'll go to you first. What you make of Ferguson, I suppose, overall, this for the 2 games, I think in the first game, quite in the game, second game, obviously much more tougher playing as 2 top class centre halves. But good week for Ferguson nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's the hype is off the charts, and I can't really fault that. Not fault it. I can't really give out about that, considering I'm probably among the football media who are the ones hyping him up. It's not just the media, but everyone's hyping him up. Fans, media, all sorts. And look, Stephen Kenny has made the point a few times now that once you're producing regularly in the Premier League, which so far Ferguson is with his 7 goals or so this season for Brighton, you can't hide away from it either. Like he is 18, but if you're producing the goods at a decent level, which Brighton are this season, you can't shy away from it. So he's in there on merit, and he's been treated no different as any other player in the team, regardless of his age. But look, it's still ridiculously early to say what sort of impact he's going to make for the Ireland team. You would suspect that his goal against Latvia was probably the first of many that will come if things keep going for him. He's attracting attention, as you know, from all the big clubs. Tottenham were the latest club today to be linked with him. There's Manchester United. We're supposed to have scouts at the front game. So look, as career trajectories go, he's only going in one direction. I thought it was interesting, actually. Kenny was talking to us about Kenny, obviously being, he's a very studious student of the game as such, loves talking tactics and formations and whatever. But he was really, he was talking to us the other day about how Brighton play, and he was saying that Roberto De Zerbi's tactics are, it's an approach that Kenny said he himself has never seen in the game, in that Ferguson will end up coming so deep that he can often be sort of in the centre circle at times, where he's winning balls and he's laying them off to the 2 wide wingers that Brighton use. and then he's galloping back into space. So he just, there was a couple of times in the France game there where, and Kenny said it after the game to us that, maybe he was a little bit too eager to please, but that he was doing what he did for Brighton in that he can come exceptionally deep at times to receive the ball, to lay it off, and then to make those runs back towards the penalty box into space, because that's particularly what he's doing at Brighton, So you could see patterns of that sort of play in his Irish performance the other day. Look, he's really raw. It's very exciting to have, because how many times have we all discussed, such and such a striker is the next great thing, and I think Aaron Connolly was hyped up when he burst onto the scene with the 21s, and look, his career, and by his own admission, off-field issues, and mightn't have always kept the best company and stuff like that. He said all this when he went to Italy, and then the thing in Italy didn't pan out for him either. We've been here before, but there's just something a bit different about Ferguson that sort of makes this feel a little bit real, and I don't think it's overhyping him to say that qualification hopes could genuinely rest on what he produces in this campaign.
Well, it's crazy to think that he's only 18 as well, and I suppose that's like you touched on it there about the hype and maybe comparisons made as well. I'll go Macdara in this one. So kind of views in this that sometimes maybe as fans, first and foremost, we have an awful habit of putting expectations on players. Like, I mean, I'm hearing comparisons to Harry Kane, for example, and in my head I'm thinking, like, it's such a weight to put on a player of 18 years old, I think his third, fourth international cap, to suddenly say, his game is going to be based on the next Harry Kane or Robbie Keane, whatever player you want to compare him to. It just, at 18, I think, just let him go out there and enjoy football and grow as a player first and foremost, and be a regular in the team before we start lamping on expectations that he's going to be the next Harry Kane or whatnot. That's my own personal view, but Macdara, I'll let you come in.
I think Brighton are managing his minutes quite well. The hype is because when he does play, he's scoring goals, and he's scoring goals as a striker in the Premier League and in the FA Cup as well. And we haven't had that for quite some time. We do have players playing, some of them playing at Premier League clubs, should I say. But the fact that he's scoring, and goals are just so important, particularly in international football. And it's his potential that we're looking at. The fact that he came through at Bohemians, and he was played as a 14-year-old against Chelsea. And actually, I saw Sean O'Connor in the Indo put up the clip from one of his runs against Chelsea from that friendly game. But then he played maybe 3 league games with Bohemians as a 15-year-old before he turned 16, and he went to Brighton. Anytime you see him interviewed, and he's been interviewed when he scores a goal, he's been on Match Today, he's been on Sky Sports, he's been on Brighton TV, which they then put up online, and everyone picks it up. He seems quite calm and measured in his responses. I think people know about his dad Barry played in the League of Ireland, and I think the family. I think he's well schooled. I think it's kind of a level. He seems very level-headed, and then physically he's quite strong as well. I think that was one of the things when there was the criticisms floating around when people heard, Keith Long had picked a 14-year-old to play against Chelsea. But I think any Bohemians fan who was there that day, or Chelsea fan who was there that day, or people who saw Ferguson play in the league, they could see he was a physically very well developed 14-year-old. It's very different. Some players who come in at a young age are just, physically aren't able, and you like to think that most managers are really watching out for that, and they're managing the minutes because they're physically not able. I think more with Ferguson, it's just they don't. They've good options at Brighton. Welbeck knocking around as well, but it's the potential that we're seeing a player play and score goals in the Premier League, and it's hard not to get excited about it, because we haven't seen that, and we haven't had. And also the fact that we had a goal scorer in Robbie Keane who scored so many goals for Ireland as well. Like that's the other thing. So it's hard not to necessarily compare, but when you think about strikers for Ireland and successful strikers for Ireland, your mind inevitably goes back to Robbie Keane, someone who scored so many goals for Ireland, but also scored so many goals in the Premier Division. And Ferguson, he's not there yet, but there's the potential that if he continues on his trajectory, that he could be that difference between us. Getting to maybe not this Euros, but maybe a World Cup to come.
Yeah, no, it's I just worry also. I always worry that I think back to when I was growing up of Anthony Stokes, for example, coming through and the hype Anthony Stokes and that kind of thing. I just don't want to label the expectation on him to it has to be him to get us through and get tournaments and all that. I suppose it's funny, Paul, looking at I don't know if social media or literally just watching YouTube earlier on today, and the first video pops up is from an English YouTuber. Don't know who he was, don't know anything about him, but other than the fact that he said Ireland has a golden generation on its hands. Now, I kind of was a bit taken aback by that because I think it's a bit too much set up. But when you go through it, there is players there. We've already mentioned a couple. Bamadelli, you look at Nathan Collins, obviously, presume we know all the players. Like, there is the potential there to have some of these players like Ferguson continue on that trajectory of improving year on year, that there could be a potential, maybe on this campaign, like Macdara said, but 2026, 2028, a potential there for a really good team.
Yeah, for sure. And that's probably the thing that I'm only guessing here. I've absolutely no idea. But I'm only guessing that I think that's the type of thing that might eat away at Stephen Kenny, in that he was the one who facilitated all these young players breaking through into the senior team for the most part. But reality is, more than likely, he's facing into his last, I was going to say his last campaign. Obviously, if it goes well, he might earn a contract extension. If we qualify, he will. But, if this campaign doesn't go well, those players have proved that, if the campaign doesn't go well, that they don't suddenly get kicked to the sideline by a new manager. These players are going to be hanging around for a long time. And I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is, I think Kenny, there'd be a bit of a shame in some respects that if he's just remembered as kind of almost the enabler, he was the person that blooded these players but never actually got to a tournament with them, because the likes of Nathan Collins and stuff like this, he's only 21, I know he's gone through a little sticky patch at Wolves where he's not in the team, and he's only making a couple of substitute appearances since I think around the end of January. I think he's only made 2 or 3 appearances. But look, Collins was very good against France. Not, obviously very unlucky to score at the end, amazing save. But he's 21 years of age. This guy's going to be in the Ireland team for the next 10, 12 years, He is a player who I still believe will probably play at a higher level than Wolves. Just for whatever reason, it's just not happening for him with the current manager. But look, there's so much talent in this Irish team, and Kenny's taken risks in terms of, bringing through so many in one go, and that is used by some people at the beginning as a stick to beat him with. And you'd have a lot of the older guards, sort of the Randolphs and the Shane Longs of this world, who did jobs for Ireland, but aren't on the scene anymore, and there'd be 1 or 2 people maybe in media who find that particularly strange. But I really don't see how that argument stacks up. There's really exciting young players coming through, and I think there's a decent crop coming through below them too. And look, it's a bright future, but we can talk about it being a bright future, and we can talk about knocking on the door, but you still need to win a few games and try and qualify for tournaments too.
Speaking of the older guard, I suppose one in particular stood out on Monday night with Seamus Coleman, 34, soon to be 35 years young. I thought the man management of Mbappe in the game, if anyone was at the match, was outstanding. Like, just how he stuck tight to him. I mean, the one race he had with him in the first half, you're kind of like everyone's kind of just sucked in that air, and Mbappe opened his legs and suddenly he got out for a corner kick. He just had a fantastic game, and just showed that 34 going 35 in with his history of injuries, still a player that Ireland are really going to rely on this campaign. Yeah,
he was absolutely outstanding, and there might have been some people who were probably not quite writing off Seamus Coleman, but just considering his injury history and the fact that he is he 35, is it? Yeah.
35 in October.
35 in October, yeah. Considering his kind of injury history and that and the fact that we've had so many new kind of defenders coming through the ranks. But you're right, like the way he policed Mbappe, and it was never a case of, a straight sort of foot race between the two of them, because there's only one winner in that regard. But Coleman's reading of the situation and reading of the game and reading of French attacks, it kind of meant that they were never kind of just starting off in a foot race from the same point, if you know what I mean. Coleman was able to just anticipate passes and anticipate balls, and he'd actually have a yard or two on Mbappe, because his anticipation of things was so good that he had that little sort of jump on him almost. But it was amazing. One thing I found quite interesting was, like the press box in the Aviva is so high. You're up on the upper tier of the West Stand. You're right in the halfway line. It's a great view, but you're very, very high up. And particularly on a really raucous night where there's a full house and the atmosphere was deafening. But there were times during the game where maybe France were in the ascendancy a little bit and the crowd was, quiet enough for maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes. And you could hear just about, you couldn't hear what they were saying, but you could hear the Irish defenders shouting at each other. And it was all kind of positional play and plugging the gaps, right? So just because some of the French movement from some of the forward players was just really, really good. And there was no particular kind of man marking as such, but you could hear Coleman, you could hear Collins, you could hear Egan just barking at each other in terms of where to be. And I just thought tactically, I think Ireland's defensive display the other night was magnificent. It was really, really good.
Just on the negatives, I suppose, and it's kind of cropped up a bit on Twitter in particular this week and social media. And I know, again, it's not the fantastic barometer to go off, but it's also what we have and we can use it. In terms of Ireland conceding goals, 3 of the goals conceded in this international window all from outside the box. Bit of a pattern maybe starting to show that, but what it is. Are we not being aggressive enough in our defending? Are we not closing the ball down? It just seems that there is a pattern with the Stephen Kane team. A lot of the goals we're conceding are from chances outside the box. It could be a concern going forward.
Yeah, I did something, sort of a follow-up piece the day after the Latvia game. I was looking back, and I just picked the start of 2021 for no particular reason. But from the start of 2021, I think Ireland had played, I think it was 21 games or 22 games, something like that. But there was 10 goals from outside the box. Now you factor in 11 from the game the other day. One of those goals was at home to Ukraine, which was a free kick from outside the box. That wasn't a shot on target. It was just a cross in that cracked all the way in and wasn't defended. But you could probably argue the same point that, they're preventable mistakes. But Kenny didn't really address it when it was put to him about these sort of long range goals. I think that was after the Latvia game and before the France game. He didn't really seem to dwell on the fact. But look, that's a serious amount of goals in, that's 11 goals in 22, 23, 24 games from outside the box. Like that's no coincidence. And the Latvian manager, like they scored 2 cracking goals against us. And the Latvian manager in the press conference afterwards somebody asked him specifically, had Latvia noticed this trait in Irish performances, that they were a little susceptible to long range shots. And he gave an incredibly long and meandering answer, but the gist of it was yes. Like it wasn't a fluke that they had noticed that teams had scored from distance against them, and that it might have been worth a try. So, we can talk about having Caoimhin Kelleher and Gavin Bazunu as our 2 goalkeepers, but they've been beaten fairly handsomely on a couple of occasions, more than a couple.
Yeah, as you said, was it 11 goals you mentioned? Was it 11 goals conceded?
I think it's 11 from outside the box now, since the start of 2021.
Yeah, so it's just, I suppose, for Kenny and his team, as much as you mentioned there, the positives of, like you mentioned, the positional play, the defending was excellent, even some of our counter-attacks weren't bad against the French, but just in terms of letting goals, long shots needs to be addressed. I suppose another thing that kind of cropped up today, did you see much with the Shane Long news coming out today? Any comment on that, what you said about the jersey?
I'll be honest with you, I wasn't covering it today because I've kind of been on League of Ireland mode for most of the day, so I wasn't covering it myself. The only thing I'm aware of was just literally reading the story. and I skim through it on my phone. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. Look, if like Long, it purely from reading the quotes, not knowing anything else about what happens, it seems to really avert Long because he's been sitting on this for 3 years.
Yeah.
So, it's a pity in some respects that this didn't come out last week, because it would have been a fascinating question to put to Stephen Kenny. If Long's account of what happened with the jersey, handing it over to Adam Ida, is correct, there's definitely a question to ask Kenny there in terms of how he may have handled that situation. But yeah, I don't know. Like we wouldn't have heard of this from Shane Long because he just doesn't really do any media stuff. I believe he may have addressed on that podcast a reason why he doesn't tend to do too much media, but I didn't listen to the full podcast. I just saw the quotes about the jersey stuff, So probably don't really have a huge amount more insight into that, to be honest, because I haven't listened to it directly myself.
Just before we let you go, obviously you mentioned League of Ireland mode is back this weekend. Two things I suppose are big in the news this week. Coming from an off the pitch standpoint, Virgin Media coming into the game, showing the game next week on the 7th. Only positive news, surely. Virgin Media hopefully get on board now, more involved in the League of Ireland in terms of more coverage. Yeah,
you'd like to think so. Like it is just a one-off game, though. Like there's no commitment from either side that this is going to continue on into anything else. So it's kind of a, let's have a look and let's see it. There is that classic kind of League of Ireland outrage, when things aren't being covered, it's kind of, this is a disgrace and, nobody's showing our games. But then when some of these broadcasters do show the games, there's nearly an onus on people to actually watch them, really, so that the viewing figures can stack up. So it's a bit sort of catch-22. But look, yeah, it has to be, it's a positive development. Will it be a long-lasting one? I've no interest. Or sorry, I do have an interest. I've no idea. Is what I'm sorry, slipped the tongue. I've no idea what's going to come of it beyond the Bows Rovers game. Well, I'm fascinated to see, just from a production point of view, I'm fascinated to see what Virgin are going to do with it, and just the simple kind of aesthetics around the whole thing. Just see what it looks like. That'll be interesting. And look, there is a gap in the market because, RT covered their, whatever, I don't know what the figure is, 17, 18 games maybe between League and Cup over the course of the season, but there's that classic big void in the middle of the season in terms of the live TV games. So LOI TV, if you ask me, is the best initiative there's been in the League of Ireland in years. It's great, but clubs do get a small dividend in terms of money from the subscriptions, but I don't think it's a massive amount of money. Well, look, we'll see how it goes. There is something very League of Ireland about the fact that almost a quarter of the way into a season, a TV broadcaster can just pop up and decide that they're going to show a game. Like, kind of just highlights how poor really the kind of situation is with TV deals and clubs getting money out of it all. Will it be worth it to the clubs? Who knows?
We'll say it's a positive overall. Though it's a positive that we.
No, it is.
Broadcasters coming to the market.
yeah, no, for sure, it is. Look, it's not negative. It's good.
Yeah.
Just let's see how it pans out, and if anything more comes on the back of it. Because if it's just a one-off, and they never do another game, like.
Yeah, I know. We've been down that road before. I suppose the old TV3. Last one before I let you go, Paul. Keith Long back in the management scene, taking over Waterford. Maybe in talk, rumours that a job in DA could have been popping up in the meantime. He's gone to Waterford instead. Big risk maybe dropping down to the first division after building a great reputation at Bowes, or is it a good choice, or where do you lie?
I think it's a good move by the club anyway. I think Keith will do well there. He'll be backed by the owner, so there should be you would think, a little bit of money to spend. They're 10 points behind Galway, but look, it's still March. Well, for another day or two, it's still March. There's a long way to go. I know Stewie Byrne, who does a column for us in the Mirror, is making the point for tomorrow's paper that he was doing his column today, and he was making the point that they're 10 points behind Galway. If Keith can claw that back to 6 points, 5 points by the summer, and if Waterford back him, and one of Keith's big strengths that he had to rely on for a long time with Bohemians, where there wasn't a huge amount of money initially, was, Keith's a good judge of player. He's got a good eye for a lot of the young Irish lads who might be coming back from England. And that'll be a strength to him, and particularly if Waterford are going to arm him with a bit of cash. There's a little bit of talk today, maybe more than talk. It seems to be a done deal, according to one or two people, that Alan Reynolds might be leaving Derry City to come back and be his number 2 for non-football reasons. Reynolds leaving because he's obviously from Waterford, so that's been reported by one or two outlets already today up in Derry. And I think John Fallon might have had a story about it as well in the Examiner. So that'd be a very interesting move, more so for the repercussions for Derry City, because Alan Reynolds has obviously been a very important part of Rory Higgins' coaching team, and they're going for the title. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Paul, thanks for your time. We'll chat again soon.
Sound, Luke? Yeah, no bother at all.
And there's kind of a lot of grumbling about maybe we don't have enough Premier League players, but in terms of the Championship,
But what's the point in grumbling about it?
But the step
I can't argue about it, can I? If they're not playing the play, what's the point of me grumbling?
The step up to international football from the Championship is it easily managed?
Well, I take you back to when we played in 2002. What's the point of me grumbling? We had lads who were all at the bottom of the Premier League, real scrapping away. Kinns and Matty Holland, and I had Gary Breen, who hadn't even got a club. What's the point of me grumbling? So I don't subscribe to that. You just, whatever it is, whatever I've got, I'll get them together and make the best of them and try and make sure we qualify. Grumbling is not one of the things I do.
You can subscribe to each new episode of the ExtraTime.ie Sportscast on iTunes. Please give a rating or add a comment there to let us know your views.
Welcome back to the second half. Macdara is still alongside me. We're back now this week. The League of Ireland's back. Macdara this week. So before we get on to the fixtures and the Shamrock Rovers, we'll start with Rovers first, actually. Just in terms of kind of your, what was it, a 6th season review, we'll say. Is it 6th season gone now?
Yeah, we're 1/6 of the season through for the men. Interesting, I was looking last night in the women's tournament division. We're a quarter of the way through for some of the teams because it's only a 20 team. Yeah. It's only a 20 game season. But yeah, 1/6 in the Premier Division. So yeah, seeing Shamrock Rovers down towards the bottom of the table is a bit strange. And yeah, I did a piece ahead of the game up in Oriel Park on Friday night, just having a look at where Rovers were statistically, because Stephen Bradley's talked about the performances have been quite good, and I've been at most of the games. I can echo that, and really I had a look at what Y-Scout was saying about the statistics and where Rovers really should be, and I think one of the main things is, if you look at the disciplinary record, they probably have the worst disciplinary record, and that's probably fed into that. We've talked a little bit about the suspensions. Rovers have 3 red cards and 19 yellows. So Pats have 2 red cards and 21 yellows for what that's worth. So they're probably head to head. And if you looked at the XG, they've only scored 9 times, but they have the highest XG on 12. And if you look at the goals conceded, they've let in 10 goals. But their expected goals are only 6.9. There's been a little bit of chat around Ireland about the expected goals and all the shots that are going in from outside the area that Ireland are conceding. But Shamrock Rovers are probably conceding more goals than they should do based on the chances given up. I think that reflects probably the reason where they are down towards the bottom of the table is they've let in some bad goals, and they've let goals in late. They've lost 6 points by letting in goals in the 89th minute or more in 3 of the matches. And it isn't a case of just adding those 6 points to the table and saying, oh, that's where Rovers will be. Those points are gone. You can't get them back. But looking at the attacking performances and their passing rate, Rovers are top on all the stats. So if you look at shots, crosses, touches in the box, one-on-one runs, dribbles, Rovers are all top. To get into the weeds on some of the Y-Scout things, so progressive runs, so ones that attempt to draw the team significantly closer to the opponent goal, the top of that. Deep completions, so that's a pass that's targeted to within a zone of 20 metres of the opponent's goals. Again, they're top of that. And only on corners, only Drogheda have got more corners. And then if you look at the passes, again, they're top of that. So, you know, from a Rovers perspective, they're probably thinking, okay, things can't turn around based on all that. The issue is they've got a difficult game on Friday night up in Oriel Park where their record isn't great, and then they travel to Dalymount Park next week on Friday. So, you know, they're two games that are going to be very, very difficult for them. But if Rovers are to turn around, they still haven't won a game. It's their worst start for nearly 20 years. But in 2010, when they won the league, they had one more point than they had at this stage of the season. They did go on to win the league, but that means they need to go on one of those runs where they put a significant amount of wins in a row. And, you know, certainly it's a squad that's good enough to do so, but they've given themselves a big distance between the teams that are above them, like Derry City and Bows, who've been the team of the season so far, who are top.
Taking all that data into account, then, is it just simply down to a bit of no luck or a bit of bad luck that's really just kind of, I suppose, kind of the way of the season at the start? Is that really what it is? It's just a bit of luck.
And I think if you look back at 2011, people will probably say Rovers had an awful lot of luck where they scored a whole load of late goals. Likes of Drogheda and Longford were sick of letting in late goals from Shamrock Rovers, who managed to turn performances around. So I think you probably could say that. Like the goal that, if people think back to Mulroney's equaliser, I should say, for St. Patrick's Athletic in the last minute in Tala, you know, where Rovers were by far the better team, but it was an absolutely super goal. And Stephen Bradley, talking just ahead of the match on Friday, you know, he highlighted that he wasn't criticising what his team could do. There was issues with maybe the defensive substitutions towards the end of that game, but Trevor Clark kind of limped down the tunnel. Liam Burt was named on the bench, but he was never going to play. And if Mulroney hadn't scored that absolutely screamer, you know, Rovers would have won 2-1 and all would have been right in the world going into the break. As to where Tim Clancy might be at this point, and maybe where Keith Long might be at this point, much speculation as to, you know, if Pats had lost that game. But that's football, and it's those small margins, which is why, you know, some people hate expected goals. But that's where you look at where those margins are based on big data, where shots are taken, you know, looking across all the leagues where goals go in. And that's where where it comes to, like, in terms of all the shot counts, and you can be unlucky, but ultimately it should even out over a season, and that's probably what Rovers will expect. But to say they have a couple of difficult games in the next week.
Yeah, just finally on, I suppose, Rovers, maybe jumping to Derry a little bit, that has the patchy form of Rovers at the start of the season, creating conditions here now for actually a good title race. I know we all anticipated this season, but I suppose when Rovers have been so dominant the last couple of years, and now obviously a slow start has allowed Derry to get 9 points ahead, and Bows even as well to get ahead, has that created conditions for a title race?
Yeah, if you look back to the shortened seasons in 2010, it was never really a title race. You know, Rovers had raced into
in 2020 with their 2020.
2020. Sorry, yeah, like they won. You know, there's 5 wins prior to the COVID break. They won 5 in a row, and then when they came back, they won another couple. And really, the title race was over. Last year in 2022, it was, you know, Derry pressed Rovers quite hard, but when it kind of came to the crunch, when they really needed to really put the pressure on, and there was a game where if they'd won, they would kind of gone above Rovers right in the run in, even though Rovers had games in hand. They didn't win it, they lost, and really they kind of fell away after that point. But the conditions are, like, even, you know, we're 6 games into the season for all the teams, and you know, Bows have just been so good. You know, they've won 5 out of 6. The one they lost was probably the game by all accounts against Shelbourne, where they didn't play particularly well. The Derry have dropped points, but they haven't lost a game. They've 3 wins and 3 draws, and Dundalk haven't had a poor enough start, and people were kind of looking at the players that Stephen O'Donnell brought in and kind of going, like, that squad isn't as good. You know, they've turned it around, and the last 4 games it's 3 wins and a draw, coming into Friday's game where they host Shamrock Rovers. So you know, if you look at that, you know, Derry, Dundalk, you know, Pat's the surprise package down where they are. Rovers the surprise package down where they are. Early days in the season, but if Rovers are going to win the league, they're going to have to really come from behind. So we're definitely in a title race. And if you look at what Bohemians have done and Declan Devine, you know, I'd have been looking at Declan Devine and kind of wondering, well, actually, is he the manager for Bohemians? If you look at the start of the season, he's done excellently for them. The issue is whether their squad can stay in a title run. They don't have, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not in Europe. I have that right.
No, they're not in Europe, no, because fourth place went to Pats last season. Pats got it because Derry won the cup.
Yeah, so they don't have that. Obviously, they'd love to be in Europe. They'd love the financial implications of that. The fans would love the away trips. But what that does mean is, you know, Derry, Dundalk, Pats and Rovers are the 4 teams playing in Europe. And when those games come around, you know, Bohemians won't have that opportunity maybe to do something when the other sides are you know, fixated, is maybe the wrong word, with Europe. And if you remember Derry City last year, they were one and done. They went out in the first round that they played last year. So they only played the 2 games, and they had a really, really sticky patch just prior to that in the league, and they just gave themselves too much of a gap. So this year now it's Rovers that have given the gap to the teams above them. So I think we definitely have a title race, even if we're only 1/6 of the way through the season. Yeah,
and I suppose one of the key things about not qualifying for Europe is that it eases the workload if you have a small squad. And that's a key point there. I mean, I think back to, was it Conte in 2015 with Chelsea? They weren't in Europe, or was it Mourinho? I can't remember one of them. Chelsea weren't in Europe that season. Then obviously other teams went far in the European competition in England, went on to win the league, Chelsea. So it can have an effect where not in Europe, less distractions, constantly for in the league. I suppose one of the big things, I suppose, for Derry and their title charge this season is going to be injuries. And obviously Mark Connolly injured at the moment. That's a huge loss to Derry. He's been a rock at the back for them.
Yeah, I've talked before about the spine of the Derry City team. Brian Maher, excellent goalkeeper, particularly with his feet, and it's the way Rory Higgins wants to play. I suppose it's the way most teams play, with a footballing goalkeeper. And then Connolly in front, who absolutely brilliant for Dundalk first half of the last season. They were really disappointed to lose him when he got kind of went back to his parent club and then was sold to Derry. And Connolly's been absolutely excellent. And then you've Will Paxton in front, and then the attacking options that they have with Colin Whelan to come in relatively soon enough as well. So Connolly is a big loss to them. A real anchor in that midfield. Really very experienced player from his time playing in the UK, and seems to be able to organise the defence really, really well. So he's a loss for them, but you know, each squad kind of knows they're going to miss out with 1 or 2 players during the season. You're just hoping that you don't have a patch where you have kind of several players out when you go into a game. So yeah, Connolly's definitely a loss for Derry City. And then I think I'm right in saying, as we're recording, it looks like Derry City have lost Alan Reynolds from his job at Derry City down to Waterford. Have I picked that up right?
I'm not 100% sure. Didn't hear that. Is he going to assistant manager with Keith Long, is he? Yeah,
that seems to be the call. Obviously, Waterford is his hometown club. He's been commuting up to Derry City as well. So that seems to be how the setup is going to be at Waterford.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, I say, Rory Higgins now with Connolly injured, he'd love to have Owen Toll available, because just thinking there, like the extra depth there was a huge loss last year. And obviously Connolly and McElhaney have a good partnership, but it depends on how long Connolly's out for. Surprise packages, we're just chatting there about Bowles. I mean, I've seen them, I watched them play live in Inchicore there about 4 weeks ago. Look very good. And I think the sign of Afolabi in particular, I don't know if you've seen him play yet, he's been outstanding, like really, really good. Like a real old school number 9. But like that'd be it's kind of unfair to label him that, because he's very good in the ball too, and he's athletic. Like, he's a good player.
Yeah, there was a lot of expectation when he was signed, and you're kind of going, okay, can he match up with that? You know, it's always the same with players who are coming back from the UK. If I can say that, you know, you players who, you know, they're coming back to the League of Ireland for a reason. And he was a little bit slow to start in terms of getting his first goal, although by all accounts he was playing well in the opening games of the season. But you know, if you get a striker, someone who can find the back of the net, and they've creative players around him, I think other players have kind of come to the fore. I think Ali Coote has been particularly good as well for Bohemians as well. So, you know, if you're going forward, you have that option. And, you know, defensively, Bohemians have been defensively with him, he's been pretty excellent as well. I think it's I think maybe it's 5 goals. Sorry, looking at the league table here, it's 5 goals they've let in. I think only Shells, Derry, and Dundalk have let in slightly less, but they're also the top scorers. So I think that shows the attacking options that they have.
Who do you think then? Who would you label the underperformers so far in our 1/6 review? Pats or Rovers?
Well, you've used the word performer there. So if you talk about performances, I think actually Rovers have played well. I think a lot of people actually no, the Shamrock Rovers Derry City game wasn't on the television, but that was a game that Derry City came and won. Rovers hadn't lost at home since 2019, I think it was in the Premier Division. But I think Rovers were unlucky that day. They actually played quite well. I think probably against Shelbourne away, they haven't performed. They didn't perform very well, but Shells just played 5 at the back. We're quite happy with a scoreless draw. In fact, the previous scoreless draw Shamrock Rovers got was away in Talca Park against Shelbourne. So that was probably a performance 7. But results wise, obviously very disappointed in having won a game, drawn 5. But I think you asked worst performer. I think it's probably St. Patrick's Athletic. Heavy defeat that they suffered to Dundalk. Did get that draw against Shamrock Rovers in the last league game. Now it's whether they can take momentum from that result. Didn't think it was a particularly good performance from Pats that night. But the fact that they're sitting in the relegation playoff zone is pretty stark. Admittedly, only on goal difference because Shamrock Rovers have a better goal difference, which they're both on 5 points coming into Friday's matches.
Yeah, I could be here for an hour giving the lecture on what I think is going wrong, but it has been a good start. Obviously, in terms of result in the last game, it's obviously a good result against Rovers away 2-2. I mean, I spoke to you before about Pats don't have a good record in Tallaght Stadium, whether they're in European competitions or playing away. I mean, I think the last game I can really remember the winning was to Conan Byrne 4 goals, which is a long time ago this stage. So like in terms of results, just looking at that, 2-2 draw in Tallaght, most times you take it no problem. But in terms of the performance, just to have me up to scratch, I think there's been huge pressure on Tim Clancy. I've mentioned before on other podcasts. I think these games are really crucial coming up from I think if he the UCD tomorrow, as we record Thursday night, a bit later this week due to international breaks, whatnot, which we record, but UCD Friday night, if that result was to go in any way other than a comfortable win, 2 or 3-0, if it's a 1-0 back to the job in Richmond Park tomorrow, I don't see that. I can see the hot seat opening up fairly soon for a manager to come in because that has to be. We've seen ourselves UCD this season. Unfortunately, lost a spine in their team. They have their cycles where they got a really promising team coming up. It gets pillaged. They drop back down to the first division, so they're in that cycle again where they probably lost their players. So if it's not a comfortable win tomorrow for them, wouldn't like to be him anyway.
Yeah, you look at the fixtures. They've got another home game after that, Cork City, and then they're up in Weavers Park against Drogheda United. I think that's the Easter. That must be the Easter Monday fixture.
Easter Monday away. Yeah. Yeah.
So they're the 3 fixtures before they go to Denman Park, and then Shamrock Rovers come to Richmond. But if you're looking at their to the Easter weekend, UCD at home, Cork City at home, and City have been good. They've been probably better than maybe people thought they'd be, coming up from the first division, and then Drogheda on the away, but an easy enough away trip in terms of they're not traveling down to Cork or over to Sligo, if you like, on Easter Monday. So I think you're looking at that. That's those next 3 games will really probably define St. Patrick's Athletic season.
Yeah, and I'd be brutally honest. If I was sitting here at the start of the season, I'd be looking at those 3 games as 3 wins. Like that's the squad we have. There's no excuse for it.
If the aim,
9 points.
Yeah, if the aim was for Tim Clancy just to kick on from last season, and really challenge for the league title. Yeah, they're the games you want to be getting, 7 points out of 9 or 9 out of 9. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Look, we'll move on. I'm getting angry. I'll move on. I suppose a quick word actually on Shells. I've obviously seen them play live. Had to beat them 1-0 on the goal. But what impressed me most was, like, whether it's not my taste in football, I wouldn't be, I'd be lying if I said it was. But I don't know if you've seen, but they're really defensively solid. And just looking at their stats there, I only conceded 3 goals in 6 games for a team only in the second season get promoted. Second year, Damien Duff, part of the aspects I say of the master and the apprentice, made a bit of Jose about him. The way he even speaks kind of a bit Jose Mourinho-ish sometimes. Like they're very solid, and I think he is building a real solid base there, using that word again, to probably grow the project, if that makes sense. And obviously the news as well, I don't know if you heard about whether Hull City are coming in, possibly. It looks like they've changed their attention from Dundalk now down to Shelbourne. So, again, there's a lot of stuff going on in the background there, but on the pitch, like, if you're not conceding goals, you're not losing many games, and that's kind of the philosophy Jose gained so much success over for many years.
Well, defensively, like they're playing 5 at the back in most games for most of each of the games. But possession wise, they're they're giving up the ball. They're actually happy to have less. Well, maybe not happy to have less possession, but they do have less possession in all the games. Just looking back over the kind of last 5-6 games, they're looking at kind of 38% possession for the last kind of 4 or 5 games. I think defensively, I would have seen Joey O'Brien up close to Shamrock Rovers and his and heard him when I was lucky enough to get to the games when games were behind closed doors, covering matches, and hearing how vocal he was in moving when he was playing for the Shamrock Rovers team. I think he's probably brought that into the Shelbourne team, and they're just very, very solid. You said they haven't conceded very many goals, and probably unlucky that Sean Boyd's had to have an operation, so he's been out. He's out. Has been out for a few weeks. He'll be out for a few more weeks as well. And he was a real potent threat for them last season, as we saw, and even the start of this season. But I don't really know what to make of the feeder club thing in Hull City. There's various different models around the league. Bohemians 100% members owned. Other clubs have kind of part membership. Dundalk, Hull City were sniffing around Dundalk, which is, Dundalk is more kind of in private ownership. Shamrock Rovers is 50% members. Dermot Desmond owns a quarter. You look at Pats, where they have kind of a benefactor who's put a significant amount of millions into the club. So, the clubs are saying, how can we maybe compete with the likes of Shamrock Rovers? Bohemians, maybe the sell-on clause seemingly they have for Evan Ferguson will sustain them if he moves on for serious money. So there's different models around, and who might say that what works, but the feeder model is just a bit of a strange one. It makes me kind of a bit uneasy, but they've been open saying that they need to get investment in, like the owner, Andrew Doyle. He was on the board at Shamrock Rovers for a while, probably going back maybe 5 or 6 years, and made a decision to kind of take over at Shelbourne. They've Dave O'Connor, who's been their CEO, I think for 4 or 5 years, is stepping down. They've been advertising for a new replacement. I think they've probably they've said that they're going to make an announcement of that reasonably soon as well. So, the attendances have been really good across the league. More sold out home games and away games this weekend. Shelbourne's crowds probably have been good, but haven't been good as elsewhere. There was the issue with when they played Bohemians in Tucker Park, and Bows fans were snapping up home end tickets, and the debate about, well, actually, if you can't sell out your home end, should you be facilitating the away end? But other away sections, essentially kind of 400, 450, 500 for most clubs, and they're been sold out. I know Pats took all 1,200 of the away allocation in Tallaght Stadium. So, how are Shelbourne going to compete with the likes of other clubs who are getting funding, particularly clubs who are qualifying for Europe, which is such a big percentage of income for the clubs that are in Europe? It's such a sizable percentage of their income for the year. So I suppose the devil's in the detail. When we saw some of the quotes from Hull when they were talking about going into Dundalk and the teams would have to set up a certain way, definitely found that very strange. And I think that was, Dundalk fans were pretty unhappy when they seemed to be the quotes, and didn't go any further from that. It's been interesting going to a couple of the Shamrock Rovers women's games over the last week and seeing a Rovers side play 4 at the back, which I haven't seen in years, because all the Stephen Bradley side had been playing 3 at the back, and actually all the underage boys team play similarly. But that's understandable. They're the players are going to progress into your team, but to be dictating to Shelbourne or Dundalk how they might play when there might be 1 or 2 players going in, or maybe players been loaned out the other way, did seem very strange. But the detail will come out over the next while if it does go through, and I don't know how ultimately fans want to see their team competitive on the pitch, and if that continues, then great. But Shelbourne also have the issue with the redevelopment of Talca Park, which they've taken back. Am I going to say take back control? Well, I suppose they have from Dublin City Council, but
they have, yeah. They kind of bought back, haven't they? Yeah.
Sorry, it's more. I don't want to use a Brexit phrase, but they need investment to come in, whereas Bohemians are in a better shape because Dublin City Council are all in the development of Dalymount Park, and Bows crowds are, the demand for tickets for Bohemians certainly seems to be outstripping Shelbourne. But of course, Bows are doing well in the league, and fans want to, that entices the more, maybe not fair weather fan, but a fan that's coming in maybe on a regular basis. And actually, there isn't a fair weather fan of Bohemians because the tickets are just been snapped up so quickly at the minute.
Yeah, well, it's funny, on the attendances part, the first time I really noticed the attendance going up was last year. Obviously, with your eye, you can tell the stadiums were full. It was more a case, I was going into actually the away end of Bows, Des Kelly stand last season, and a guy came up to me and said, "Do you have a ticket for the game?" I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'll give you 40 quid for the ticket."
Yeah,
and I was just, "No, I actually want to see the game." And he goes, "No, I'll give you 50. I was like, "No, it's nothing to do with the monetary value. I just want to go watch the match." And I just found that an incredible moment of this. There's actually there's demand here if we can get it right. I know it's been said so many times and so many people sound bites out there, people saying it, but that was the first time I physically realised that there is demand there if it was nurtured and catered for. Just last point before we finish the episode, I've listened to other bits and bobs during the week. Do you think the league is sustainably developing? I know it's kind of a tough question to answer, I suppose, in a minute or two, but just from little things like players, clubs retaining players, attendances going up, season tickets going up. I think the league is, it's for the first time in my lifetime, is actually developing at a sustainable rate. And not usually, but it is developing, maybe ticking along nicely.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors to that, and definitely increased attendance. It's a secular thing. Increased attendances brings more money into clubs, and provides more investment. But I also think the underage structures. So clubs have underage teams. So those young boys and girls are playing for St. Pat's, or they're playing for Finn Harps, or they're playing for Sligo Rovers, whoever it is, and then they feel part of that club. They'll go and see the senior side, be it the men's senior side or the women's senior side as well. And then mention Brexit, but it's provided a huge challenge for League of Ireland clubs. The fact that previously player got to 16 and 17, and if they were kind of best in class, they were heading to the UK, and they were being developed by clubs in the UK. And then we were getting, if they didn't quite make it, then players were coming back into the league. And we'll always get players coming back in. But now it's a big challenge for clubs. They now have to develop those players between 16 and 18, unless there's a number of players who've gone to, a small number who've gone to Serie A, because you can move within the EU once you're 16, but you can't move to the UK until you're 18. And so that's providing I say that the challenge, but an opportunity for clubs. So you've players that are coming through, the likes of, you'll see Sam Curtis at St. Pat's,
Justin Farzai.
Yeah, Justin Farzai at Shamrock Rovers, maybe a little less so this season, but anyway, but players coming through, and fans saying, "Oh, these are our own," and then players going at 18. But we've seen players come through. They're making the team better off. if they're leaving when they're signing professional contracts, there's better transfer fees coming back into the clubs. And then obviously the financial element with Europe, the money is it's a step change from if you go back 10 years, I know the figures to hand when Stephen O'Donnell slotted the penalty home for Shamrock Rovers in Belgrade. It was essentially worth 1 million euro for Shamrock Rovers. Last year when they qualified for the Conference League, all told, they're looking at probably 3.6, 3.7 million. So, that's sizable, even in 10 years. And people are well aware of inflation, but that's a sizable jump as well. So, but it's the fact that Virgin Media are much maligned, are actually going to be showing a League of Ireland live game, and they need to have that to stack up commercially. And they've decided, they're going to go with that. It's not, they were showing Conference League games, and when they were in TV3, there was other games shown. But and the fact that games are sold out, the fact you mentioned, that story of people looking for tickets, and it's probably helped, by, I talked about the underage setup within the FAI, but even the promotion of the league. We were at the Ireland games over the last week. The advertisement within in the stadium, within the match program, even branding exercise, and some people may laugh at that, but the branding, you see something on Twitter and that's something to do with the Premier Division, that's something to do with the First Division, and that's something to do with the women's Premier Division, as I'm calling it. We're not talking about the WNL, even those types of things, and the model that more and more clubs are going to have a senior side. Like I see Dundalk this week looking at their shirt sponsor for their women's under-19 team, and Dundalk have that ambition to have a senior side. And so that all the clubs across the league, you have this club ethos about your underage structure at men and for boys and girls, and that you have a men's team and a senior team, and it fosters that kind of club spirit, that community spirit around the clubs. And we'll have seen the investment that clubs are doing within their own time and money within their community seems to be paying dividends, which is great.
Yeah, and just to finish that story very quick, I should have sold the tickets. Pat's last 1-0, Steve Mann scored and made it 1-0 balls. So it was a mistake on my end. I should have sold the ticket and made a €30 profit.
I know you're not you're better than that. You're better than that, Luke. You wouldn't sell a ticket for profit, so I'll take that as positive.
And just before we finish up, a quick run through the fixtures this weekend in the SSC Electricity League. On Friday night, we have Shelbourne, Derry City, Dundalk, Shamrock Rovers, Cork City, Drogheda United, St. Pat's Athletic versus UCD, and Sligo Rovers versus Bohemians. In the First Division, we have Athlone Town v Galway United, Wexford v Treaty United, Cove Lambert Bray, Waterford Finn Harps, and Longford Town Kerry on Saturday night. And as we record on Thursday evening, there was a round of fixtures in the Women's Premier Division. I'll run through the results fairly quick. It was Treaty United 1, Cork City 1, Athlone Town 1, Galway United 2, Bohemians 3, DLR Waves 0, Shamrock Rovers 2, Wexford Youths 1, and Peamount 1, Shelbourne 4. A reminder that all games will be on LOI TV, so be sure if you can't get to a game, tune in to LOI TV, get the season pass. Come on, get the season pass. It's great value. And a reminder, Oisin and the team will be back with the Voice Notes podcast over the weekend, so be sure to tune in either Friday night or Saturday morning when it's released. I want to thank our guests, Macdara as always, and Paul O'Hare from the Irish Daily Mirror, and we'll chat to you all next week.